Next, we turn our attention over to the grain markets, and joining us on the desk, Doug Simon from Tredas. Doug, good to see you.
Good afternoon. It's good to see you.
Talk about the grain markets, some of the happenings lately, and also get in some risk management advice, hopefully, as part of this broadcast. But size up the corn and soybean markets over the past week or so. Saw a nice rally.
We've had a nice rally. We were at 491 on Monday, Tuesday actually, and beans went up to 1230 in terms
People
of price.
13 better.
Yeah, 13 would be nicer, I know. So we were just talking about that earlier. Corn was down to around 445 earlier, so we've had about a 45-cent rally on the corn side. Beans have rallied about 86 cents. We were down in that 1150 range, earlier this spring. So we've had a nice rally, which has given us an opportunity to step up and make some sales. When we look at 490 corn, 480 corn, you sell some today or earlier in the week or last week. It's where the carry was last year in the market at the time, maybe 20, 25 cents. That's something you can put together and get over $5 corn eventually if you're going to store some of that corn. So it's a nice rally that we've had. So,
are we still stuck in the ranges for both corn and soybeans, though?
Well, when you look at it, we're in the upper end of the range of both the corn and the beans right now from where we were, and we had such a long, drawn-out bottom that we put in both of those. With the funds were really short, and they had been pressing corn from last October, and beans for that matter. So it's really we have had a pretty abrupt rally just here. So we did break out of that low that we put in, and the funds started recovering some of those shorts. But they still have a couple hundred shorts on in the corn and have shorts on in the beans and the wheat. So it's nice to see them moving out of some of those positions and giving us higher prices.
You and I are talking ahead of the USDA reports that'll come out to the end of the week. But from your perspective, what has been fueling this rally for both of those markets?
Well, part of it's what's going on in South America. They've had quite a bit of flooding in Rio Grande do Sul, and then have some problems with the Argentine corn crop, a stunt problem. And then also in the U.S., we're a little bit behind on 4 points behind normal on corn planting. Beans actually got off to a fast pace. We're about 4 points ahead, but been pretty wet. Nebraska down in the southeast corner, up in the northeast corner, and then up in northwest Iowa. So there are some areas that are pretty wet. Over in Illinois, they've definitely had more rain than average, but they're not extremely wet like a couple of those areas. Northwest Iowa is probably one of the wetter areas. But that's what's part of it is those funds were so short and everybody was so negative that we finally have got some information that's a little more constructive. Not wildly bullish, but at least changing their attitude. Well, risk reward, should they stay with those big short positions?
Talk about the reports, as I mentioned, they'll come out kind of in a limbo here as we broadcast today. But what information will you be paying attention to as those come out?
Well, the big number will be the acre number from the March intentions report that was surveyed on March 1st, and acres on corn were down to about 90 million acres. And they'll use a 181 trend yield, which is normal. So the commercials have been running those numbers in their heads since that came out, or even back into last February. So the big questions I think, will be, with that reduction in corn acres, how many of those are going to go into beans or wheat or cotton? I mean, we already saw that in the report, but when you put up those numbers, they're still using carryout stocks of about 1.8 billion up to about 2.1 billion, which is still pretty big carryover versus the billion, 1 billion that we've been carrying out, in 2019 and 20. So we definitely still have some pretty big, carryout numbers. Now, it all depends what happens to yield, of course, but the export side of it's improved a little bit on both the corn and the bean side. So that's kind of helped draw down some of those carryover stocks. But that'll be really contingent upon what USDA does on Brazil and Argentina, on what they have on crops down there. USDA's been pretty conservative over the last 2 years. So people are wondering to see if they're going to come down with those numbers. But they've been overestimating them previously, so they're reluctant to come down. So we'll see what happens on that.
I mentioned we could talk some risk management here on today's broadcast for producers still with grain in storage right now. Any particular advice or things you're suggesting?
Well, the basis has been really hot the last month as we've gone through into planting, and so that's been pretty good. So if we've had old crop stocks, we've been selling it, taking advantage of the basis. People didn't want to part with it if they hadn't had it hedged. You can buy some call spreads, which give you a way to keep some ownership on it. But new crop wise, like I was saying, we went from that 445 to 490 level. So trying to hit, again, we're looking at risk management and what's your overall portfolio? Like this morning I had a client, I was talking to him, there was a recommendation from somebody that was bearish and another person was bullish. And so how do you make decisions on that? Well, you got to think about what your overall production is, what your crop insurance guarantee is. And there's a really good book by a poker player named Annie Dukes. It's called Thinking in Bets. So if you've got $2 million worth of crop here, are you going to just place all your bet in one, on red or whatever and just say, you got to look at trying to sell over time, try to sell increments. And that's Bob Wisner from the famous Iowa State economist says, you got to start selling your corn when you're starting to put it in the planter box. So that's now. So we got to be making sure that we're selling ahead. And we've had opportunities lately. So I made the analogy, you got to step up to plate and make a swing. Last time I was here, you got to get up to the plate and take a swing at some of these prices for next year because they're decent prices in the big scheme of things.
All right. Final word is yours. What else do you want to share?
Well, the basis levels, I said, like they have backed off about 15 cents on some of the old crops. So they have been improving down at the Gulf, and they've been improving in Brazil and Argentina on both the corn and beans. So that's encouraging too. So there's some fundamental things that are, backdrop that are encouraging. Big picture is going to be what's going to happen with this transition from La Nina from El Nino to the La Nina, and are we going to be warmer, hotter, drier later this summer? So even though I'm telling you to make some sales now, it's not with the idea that the highs are in or anything of that nature, but take a swing at it and get an increment done.